Netflix, Peacock, Amazon Prime, Disney+, streaming media services change not only people's viewing habits, but also change the dynamics facing WCTV. Content is tailored to specific viewer interests, which, for the viewer, is a good thing. It allows people to cut the cord and eliminate programming they neither watch or need. An unforeseen consequence is that it impacts WCTV in a very challenging and costly way.
WCTV is funded almost entirely by a percentage of cable companies' revenues, based off the amount of cable subscribers we have in Wilmington. In short, less cable subscribers equals less revenue for WCTV. If you utilize any of WCTV's resources by creating your own program or watching local meetings and sports online, and you are not a cable subscriber, there is a way to help. I hope you will consider making a donation so that we can continue delivering these programs and more to you. For those of you who have made a donation, I thank you. We do receive these and we are very appreciative.
Everybody, welcome to this evening, October 25th, Board of Selectmen call. I'd like to start the meeting with a roll call, please.
Judy O'Connell present.
Gary DePalma present.
Greg Bendel, present.
Kevin Kyra present.
And Lilia Maselli present. I'd like to ask you all to stand now and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
We did.
You did very well. Okay. And once again this evening, we are all wearing a bit of pink in support of Breast Cancer Awareness Month. We're going to start off with the transmitting of the Treasury warrants, number 16, 16A, 17, and 17A.
Motion to accept.
Second.
All in favor? Unanimous and approved. Next, we're going to move on to the approval of minutes. I'd like to start with the December 16th, 2019 minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
One abstention, please.
Yes. Judy will abstain. Approved. Next, we're going to do the September 13th, 2021 meetings.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Unanimous. And lastly, October 12th, 2020 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All right. All in favor? Approved. All right, next we're going to move on to appointments. First up, we have Patrick Giroux for the, he's the chairman of the 4th of July Committee. Request to use the town common for the tree lighting on December 4th, 2020. Pat, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Good
I want to
evening.
thank you all for inviting me here, and thank you very much to Bev for putting me first on the agenda. It's much appreciated. So here we are again, although we're 2 years late to this given the pandemic. So we are very excited for the 4th of July Committee to be in front of you tonight to request permission for the annual Wilmington tree lighting. So this year we are slating the annual tree lighting to be Saturday, December 4th, 2021. The festivities are scheduled to kick off at 4 p.m. and continue until about 7 p.m. We do have a special visit from Santa Claus that evening in conjunction with the Wilmington Fire Department. He'll arrive on a fire engine at 5:45 p.m. that evening to help count down the annual lighting of the trees on the common. As in the past, we have several exciting events for that evening, which will include cookies and hot chocolate. This year, we are very excited to partner up with the Shawshene Technical High School. They'll be working with their culinary arts department so we can purchase the cookies from those students. We'll have the annual ice sculpture sponsored by the Wilmington Tewksbury Chamber of Commerce. We'll have the Wilmington Minutemen escorting Santa Claus to the gazebo. We'll have the Wilmington High School a cappella group, Soundscape. The Wilmington High School cheerleaders will participate in passing out the cookies and hot chocolate. Wilmington Community Fund will be participating in the annual ornament sale inside the 4th of July building. We'll also have members of the Wilmington Fire Department collecting unwrapped toys and donations for Wilmington children. And we'll also have a presentation from various members of the Wilmington clergy to present a small presentation. Some details that have yet to be firmed up, but we are certainly hopeful, include the horse-drawn hay rides and the kiddie rides presented by Cushing Amusements. Again, we are in the midst of planning the event, so that's a few things that we are certain and a few things that we are certainly hopeful for. And one thing that's going to look a little different this year opposed to other years is typically after the tree lighting, we always invite the children of Wilmington to join us in the Wilmington 4th of July building to have a photograph with Santa Claus. We figured in light of COVID, it's in everybody's best interest to try our best to eliminate mass crowds inside and try and keep everything outside. So we will be omitting the annual photos with Santa inside the 4th of July building. Again, in the midst of the outbreak and trying to be mindful of the pandemic and its current state. We are also, new this year, we'll be getting some portable restrooms, again, to try and alleviate the crowds inside the building. So we'll partner up with the Department of Public Works so they can provide some lighting outside. And the Wilmington 4th of July Committee will provide some portable restrooms for the outside as well. The interior restrooms will, of course, be open, but we're just trying to mitigate as many crowds as we can inside. So, again, we are looking forward to an event this year. So we have a great committee in place that are looking forward to lighting up the common in spirit. And again, we certainly want to thank you all, the Board of Selectmen, Town Manager Jeff Hull and his staff for supporting the event. And of course, the event would not be possible without the efforts of the Wilmington Department of Public Works, the Public Buildings Department, Police Department, and Fire Department. And we're also very grateful for the contributions of the department heads and staff of each department. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll open up to questions from the board. Selectman
Thank
Bendel?
you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Giroux. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate the presentation. Appreciate the work that you and your committee are doing. Preparation for this great event. Look forward to it, and I look forward to supporting it here tonight. But since I do have you here, I do have to try to put you on the hot seat, ask you something unrelated that your committee does such a great job with, and I know we're 9 months away, but have you had any initial talks about possibility of bringing back the 4th of July festivities for next year?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2019, the celebration would have turned 40 years old. The Wilmington 4th of July celebration has been one of Wilmington's oldest traditions and most coveted traditions. And it was a true disappointment to cancel it, but of course, in the midst of everything going on a few years ago, it was in the best interest of everyone's health to cancel it, as well as last year as well. There was just too many elements going on. This event takes several months to put together. We typically start meeting at the month after the celebration. We do a debrief and we start planning for the next year. So it takes a full year to plan this event. We have several dedicated people involved in town in order to produce this event. And the reason I'm saying all this is because we haven't stopped meeting ever since the pandemic broke out. We've been doing Zoom meetings and we recently resumed in-person meetings, but we've been planning the event for about 2 years now, so we're looking forward to hopefully producing a 40th celebration this year. How it will look will be a little perhaps different from how it's looked in years past, but we do look forward, granted all approvals come into play from various constituents in town, to a 4-day celebration with the various elements such as the fireworks, the carnival, the concerts, the family activities. All the small details that fall within those buckets are still to be determined, but we do very much look forward to a celebration this year. Our committee's taken a new direction. We have several new faces on board, which we are very excited about. We could still use some extra hands for a lot of the execution of the event, so for anybody in town that would like to get involved, perhaps they want to give back to this celebration, we could use people in various capacities to help put the event together, all the way to putting the event out in front of the town. So we look forward to any help we can. But to answer your question, we very much look forward to a celebration this summer.
As do we. Thanks so much for that. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? Okay, Mr. Hull? Anything to add?
No, I'm looking forward to the event on the 4th and for July 4th.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Further Chair, to Mr. Hull, are
Yes.
we to be voting on this?
Yes,
We typically do,
yes.
because I do not see
I know,
that
that's
on
what
a
I was-
board to consider. So we'll have to wait until our next meeting to do that?
No, you can, as has been the case in instances in the past, you can take it up, take a vote now because it's a presentation.
Okay.
Okay, then I would, thank you, Mr. Kyra, for bringing that up. I would like to propose that we approve Mr. Giroux's request to use a town common for the tree lighting on December 4th, 2021.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Okay, it's unanimous.
Thank you very much. We'll see you in a few
Congratulations,
months.
and we look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up, I put on my glasses. Apologies. We have Assistant Town Manager and HR Director Carrie Colburn Dion regarding the Verizon Cable License Renewal Ascertainment Public Hearing. Good evening, Carrie.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me here this evening. It's been a while since I've been in front of the board to talk about the process for the renewal of the cable license with Verizon. Our current contract expires February 25th of 2022. And at your March 5th meeting, the board appointed 5 members to the Cable TV Advisory Task Force to carry out all steps of the ascertainment process for the renewal, including holding the public hearing and negotiate on behalf of the Board of Selectmen. So the members of the committee, or the task force, are myself, George Breslin, who is a resident and has been on the committee in the past, and has also been a committee member of WCTV. Karen Campbell, who's also our recreation director and a resident, Ken Lord, the IT director from the school, and John O'Neill, who's the IT director from the town. And we also have strong participation by Ryan Maliar, who's the executive director of WCTV. He's a non-voting member. And we're represented by the form of legal counsel by attorney William Hewig of KP Law. We've met several times, and we are in the process of ascertainment. And what is ascertainment? So it's really 2 primary components are to determine if the cable operator is in compliance with its current license, and also to determine what the town's future community cable needs will be to support PEG on an annual basis, including capital for the term of the license. Our legal counsel has advised us that we should be prepared for the following things in the new license. So it's going to be a little bit different than what you've seen in the past. And the reason is because Verizon has new corporate license renewal policies in place. So we will be expecting a maximum license renewal term of 5 years, not 10, as in the past. We currently are on a 15-year license. And we're also expecting the inclusion of unilateral termination clause, which will permit Verizon to terminate before the license term under certain conditions. And those conditions will be outlaid in the license agreement. So you'll know exactly what those terms would be. And also we're expecting that capital grants won't be a finite annual amount. They will likely be either a per subscriber amount, like $1 per subscriber, for example, or they'd be expressed as a percentage of the gross annual revenue. So that's a little bit different also, because in the past it's been an annual amount, or it's been an amount that's divided over the term of the license. So you'll see a few things that will be different when the draft license comes to you for review and discussion. We will continue to request the 5% annual operating support that we currently receive from Verizon. So that's the maximum. So we'll continue to request that on an annual basis. And currently we get $25,000 per year for capital from Verizon. And our budget shows more than that, so we will try to negotiate a higher number to meet the needs of WCTV and the PEG programming. Ryan Maliar has put together a 5-year operational plan that will be presented at the hearing, and a 10-year capital plan. So we'll go over those numbers in a bit more detail at the public hearing. The public hearing itself is going to be held November 15th at 6 p.m. in the auditorium at Town Hall. The public is encouraged to attend and be heard regarding whether the current cable operator is in full compliance with the currently existing cable-related needs. Come forward with complaints, come forward with praise, come forward with comments about WCTV. We really would like to have the public there. And also to determine what the town's future community cable-related needs will be. A video that has been put together by WCTV is currently running on WCTV, and it will also be shown at the public hearing. And it does provide departmental support from the community for the programming that's run on WCTV. So this is really the town's opportunity, the residents' opportunity for in-person support, complaints, praise, and any discussion that they'd like to have. We want them to be heard at the hearing. When the hearing is over, shortly thereafter, we'll begin negotiations with WCTV, and of course, the terms of the agreement are subject to the approval of the Board of Selectmen and Verizon's corporate management. The draft license will first be reviewed by council, myself, and the town manager. Then it will go to the Cable Advisory Task Force for review, and then finally be presented to the Board of Selectmen for review and any discussion. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll open it up to the board. Are there any questions? No? Okay. Mr. Hall, any questions?
No, I think I appreciate certainly Carrie's efforts in shepherding this process through, and the contributions from all the members who have served on the Cable TV Advisory Task Force. This is, as Carrie noted, the first license was granted back almost 15 years ago, and the state and federal laws essentially dictate the process. So in the case of Verizon, where it was their first license, they were granted a 15-year license. Typically, in the past, after the first license, it would revert to a 10-year license. But as Carrie noted, given the changing dynamics with streaming, and people have a lot of ways to get access to programming these days, and so as it was noted, the expectation is that this license would be for much shorter duration.
Thank you, Carrie, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have Michael Wood, CPD Director, and Joseph Labayo, Business and Utility Manager, regarding per and polyfluoroalkyl, I'm saying it wrong, I know substances, but it's the Pfas, exceedance of maximum contaminant level. Thank you both for being here.
Well, thank you for having us. Unfortunately, usually when I come in before the board, it's never good news. And this time is no different, but it does have a good ending. I know you've all been given the memo that we wrote to Jeff. And what I'd like to do is, Joe Labayo is our utility manager, and he oversees the water treatment facilities and all the dealings with the DEP. So I'd like him to just go over basically your memo, all the facts and what's out there, then we will, tell you where we're at today, and be happy to answer any questions that I'm sure you'll have.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So PFAS. PFAS is something that's affecting many towns in the Commonwealth. In fact, it's an issue across the country. You might have seen this on the news. It's been in the national news. It's been in the local news quite often, and especially in Massachusetts. This situation is not unique to Wilmington. In Massachusetts alone, as of last week, there were over 76 other communities who were dealing with a similar situation. So PFAS, what is it? PFAS are human-made chemicals typically associated with any non-stick coating, like Teflon and waterproofing, stain-proofing, firefighting foam. What makes PFAS unique is that they don't degrade easily in soil and water. So that's why you might hear them be called the forever chemicals. Until recently, there hasn't been a real standard or rule as far as how much is safe to drink in water. In fact, EPA doesn't have a standard for PFAS. They have a health advisory level of 70, that's 70 parts per trillion. Since there was no MCL, which is the max contaminant level that DEP sets, DEP went about setting out its own standards. So how they approach it, they took a sum of 6 individual PFAS. Now keep in mind, there are thousands of PFAS out there. They took the sum of 6, and if you exceed, they add them up to come up with a total of 20 parts per trillion. So the EPA health advisory is 70 parts per trillion. DEP set a standard of 20 parts per trillion. So why am I saying this? As you know, one recent sample from the Sargent Water Treatment Plant came back at 20.6 parts per trillion. So, as I mentioned, that exceeds the 20 parts per trillion that the DEP sets. Keep in mind, this is not a violation, but it does require public education. And that's required within 30 days of receiving the sample result. So that's why we're here tonight, and that's why you were provided with the correspondence. So what are we doing? What have we done? Where are we going? So since we received the result, we've been moving very fast, very proactively. We've taken measures both short-term and long. And I'm happy to report, as Mike mentioned, that the sample taken last week is now below the 20 parts per trillion, and it's at 16.5 parts per trillion. We received that result today. So what do we do to achieve that? We decreased the amount of water that was being distributed to the public from the Sargent Water Treatment Plant by shutting down one of the wells. What this did is it decreased the load on the carbon filters that are in place at the water treatment plant. And as mentioned, we took a follow-up water sample after shutting off that one well. And as I mentioned, we received that today. So in addition, we increased the amount of water being taken from the MWRA to make up for that lost amount from that one well that was deactivated. Why do we do that? The MWRA has no detection of PFAS, so we're able to blend that with our own system water to achieve that positive result. Something else we've done, we've initiated the process of replacing the granular activated carbon at the Sargent Water Treatment Plant. So GAC, as it's called, that's a primary method to remove PFAS. Fortunately for Wilmington, we already have GAC infrastructure in place. That's currently one of the methods that we use to treat the water. Some other towns in the area aren't so lucky, and they'll be forced to spend upwards millions and millions of dollars to address that. So in this aspect, this is something that we are quite fortunate to have already in place. So as I mentioned, we initiated the replacement, and we expect the carbon to be replaced tomorrow morning, which is essentially unheard of. Typically, this is a 3 to 4 month process, so we got lucky once again. Once the once the GAC is in the process of being replaced, the Sargent Water Treatment will be offline to do that. We're estimating that to be offline for about 2 weeks or so. While it's down, we'll also conduct some other maintenance that's required. In addition, we've also created a Town of Wilmington Pfas informational page. That will be live tomorrow morning. That contains a wealth of information, frequently asked questions. There's several links and resources to Mass DEP and other regulatory agencies. And again, that will be live tomorrow morning. That'll also contain the Board of Selectmen memo that you have tonight, along with the most recent and past sample results. And finally, we'll continue with our monthly PFAS sampling that is required, and that will continue to be required through DEP. And we'll continue to engage with DEP to meet all of our regulatory obligations. So what happens now? Well, with a level over 20, the DEP advised those people in a sensitive group to not consume the water. As we mentioned, luckily, we're back down below, underneath that 20 parts per trillion. This was not a Tier 1 violation through DEP. DEP is set up and violations are public notifications in different tiers. A Tier 1 violation would be your typical E. coli boil water order situation where it's an immediate health threat deemed by DEP. DEP declares this a Tier 2 notice. So a Tier 2 notice, they allow the towns, or actually recommend a certain time frame, and they provide 30 days to educate the public on this situation. So again, that's why we're here tonight. So what's next for residents? Residents should be aware that per the DEP requirement, an educational flyer will be mailed out to everyone. It'll have the ins and outs of the situation along with several links that if they're interested they can visit. Essentially, it's just a summary of what I've described tonight. So the bottom line is there was an exceedance of the Mass DEP level that requires the education, as I've spoken about. The town took measures immediately to address the issue, and the level, I'm happy to report, is now back below that MCL. And I guess I can leave it at that in case anyone has anything else to add.
I have a question before I open up to the rest of the board. Thank you for all that information and for your quick response to this. When was the last test prior to getting the 20.6 results?
When was it taken?
Yeah.
October 6th.
Okay, so they're done regularly.
They're done monthly.
They are even before this. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you
so
for
this is a
clarifying.
newer regulation, as I mentioned, through DEP. And towns that have similar sizes to Wilmington, we just were required to start sampling in April 2021.
Okay.
So we've been doing this monthly since that time.
Okay. So that elevated number clearly wasn't there too long.
No, I don't think so, no.
Okay.
Because certainly the past results were not at that level.
Right. Okay, thank you. I'll open up to my colleagues here for further questions.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mrs.
You mentioned that you shut down one of the wells and got the levels down low. Does that mean that we're gonna be losing another well in
No.
town? Or is you just shutting it down?
No, we just took that level off to take the load off the Sergeant Water Treatment Plant, because all three of the wells that are treated at that plant have PFAS. One of the primary ways to treat for PFAS is a carbon bed. Fortunately, that is the type of filtration system we use at that plant. So we took the one well that we knew was on the higher side. We took that offline. That reduces the load going through that carbon bed, so it's able to remove more of the PFAS from the other two wells. It immediately resampled and came back with a result, about 5 nanograms per liter less than, the exceedance that we had.
So when you complete the repair or replace of the carbon, will that well go back online?
It will. In fact, our plan is to, it'll take us about the entire week to replace the carbon. Got to remove the old carbon, clean it, the well itself, and then we put the carbon back in, backwash it a few times, get it online, adjust the chemistry and what have you. And we plan on doing that probably Friday, let it run through Saturday, Sunday, and take a sample on Monday, November 1st. At that point, we'll probably shut the plant back down, finish up the other maintenance items that need to be accomplished for the next week or two. We expect to get the test results back. Typically, it's about a 3-week turnaround, and I would fully expect that level to be under 10, possibly as low as 5, but somewhere in that ballpark once that new carbon bed is up and running.
These carbon filters, are they, is there a scheduled maintenance for them, or is
Yes,
just?
we typically budget every 3 years. But we test the carbon quarterly, and there's certain parameters, everything from iodine numbers, molasses numbers, particle size, sieve analysis, and types of things like that, so we know if the carbon's good or not. And all indications are currently that the carbon is good, but the scientists, and they haven't come out with this officially yet, but the carbon companies are telling us, because this is, like Joe had mentioned, throughout the country, this is a major, major problem for the country. I forget where I was going with that, but the,
Yeah, basically the duration to change out typically in the past, where we were at 3 years, 4 years, if you're lucky, maybe 5 years. In our conversations with the various carbon vendors, they're seeing out there that you might be required to change it out more like 1 year, every year and a half or so. Basically, you're just moving up. This is a capital item that we have, and we're just moving up the, how often those carbon beds are changed out.
Right, so at this point in time, we don't know how often that will be. 3 years, we'd always done that, like Joe says, sometimes we go 4 or 5 years based on that, all those testing of the carbon. But now, unfortunately, those numbers that we used to tell how good the carbon was are not useful in removing PFAS. So we will continue to test monthly. We'll plot it out as we see the the PFAS rising to a point where it's becoming an issue, say up around 15 parts per trillion, we will then change out the carbon.
Thank you very much.
Runs about $130,000 per carbon change, so, we want to get the most out of it, but we don't want to exceed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you for the presentation and obviously for being here. Just to ask a couple of questions regarding, there's a couple of different ways I want to take this conversation, but I'll start somewhere here. So with the MWRA, you indicated that they don't have a detect, but we do.
Right.
What would you characterize that they're doing differently, potentially, that Wilmington may not be, such that they have a no detect and we do?
Their water supply is the Quabbin Reservoir. They own all the property around the Quabbin Reservoir. Hasn't been a history of heavy industrial use and manufacturing of the type of products that Joe mentioned earlier that use PFAS, from pans to carpeting to clothing. So that's why they don't have it. We're pulling from certainly an area that has a checkered past environmentally over the last 300-400 years, and so we're pulling from the ground, and we just have to be vigilant on the various chemicals that show up from time to time.
Understood. So in terms of, is there anything that we should be looking at in terms of a town going forward from a capital improvement perspective, knowing that this is becoming a heightened standard, that we'll have to be budgeting for things that maybe we haven't in the past? So to that point, with this expense coming quite quickly, can you speak to how it's being financed, and did you have the money in your budget, or are we going to have to go for an emergency situation with the finance committee?
We do have the money. What we did was we had it budgeted for next year. The water department uses essentially an enterprise account, so the money that comes into the water department stays in the water department. So we had $100,000 scheduled to do some pipeline maintenance that we didn't get done because of COVID. So we're just going to transfer that money over. And I believe the price we got was $96,000.
$99,696.
So we had it, and then we'll just use that money that we had budgeted next year for what we were going to do this year, but was kicked out because of COVID.
Okay. So
And also, just to expand on that, we also, run B, C, and D plans, and over the last few years, we've also been enhancing the distribution system so that if we were to need to go to full MWRA, we would have the capacity to do so.
Okay. In addition, you indicated that you're testing monthly. Are you collecting the samples, or do we have an outside vendor, and who is the lab that we're using to do that?
No, we collect those in-house.
Okay.
We have a couple different treatment operators. They've all been to training
Okay.
specifically for PFAS, because PFAS is a very sensitive chemical. It takes, rigorous training. And we contract right now with Contest Lab out of East Longmeadow.
So in terms of you being able to get a test result, you had indicated it takes about 3 weeks. For you to be able to produce the results that you did, you must have had a rush on this?
Exactly.
And I'm assuming if you go and you replace the carbon, you're going to be able to get rush testing to make sure when you're going to have a certain level of satisfactory test results before you bring it back online?
We will ask for expedited testing. That's a 50% premium over the normal testing rate, and then it depends on the lab's schedule.
Sure.
Unfortunately, everybody seems to test the beginning of the month because you know how long it's gonna take, and you have to get results to the DEP before the end of the month. So there's no guarantee with the lab on when you're gonna get that sample, when you expedite. You know, you can ask them at the time. Right now, it's at the end of the month, so we were able to turn around 3-4 days. If we do that on November 1st, it could be a week, it could be 10 days, it could be 3 days, you know, you just sort of luck of the draw.
Right. Now, what is the cost of a test cost? What does it cost to test?
Right now, we're paying about $350 per sample.
Okay. So lastly, you know, and I want to be clear, I'm a big fan of your department. You guys do an excellent job. Mike, you've been at the helm for a long period of time. I truly respect what you do. I'm asking this more in the form of a question and to be educated. As a member of the Board of Selectmen, I see it as a responsibility to partner with various departments and department heads to communicate to residents. I understand you articulated a Tier 1 and a Tier 2 in the communication path. Obviously, I'm particularly sensitive to anything that may represent a public health concern. So I want to just talk about communication protocol and how you've derived your communication plan and what you think is the best method, because I don't want to have panic buttons hit, you know, at home. But then again, there is a classification of people that shouldn't be drinking this water per the recommendation. To that end, do you have cross communication with Shelley Newhouse, and how does she fit into this picture? Because obviously you're in the DPW realm, you're experts on water, but we also have the medical side of things, and then we have the community interest. So can you just help me understand a synergistic picture as to how you communicate in town hall, so that the residents at home know that you're all looking out for our public welfare?
So, well, certainly anything that's out of the normal, first person that's notified is town manager. And then Shelley was notified, and has been notified about other chemicals, you know, anything from sodium to chlorides, anything that, you know, starting to rise up to levels that could be of concern to even one person in the community. So she's well aware of this. She's well aware of Pfas, knows everything that we've talked about tonight, and what a big problem it is. Certainly at 20.6 parts on a snapshot picture at one plant. And like I say, Joe said earlier, that's not a violation until we went 3 months in a row with elevations above 20. Does it become a DEP concern at that point? And then you'd go to tougher levels of education, as they call it, but mandates is what I would call it. In this case, it's just the science isn't really there yet on this chemical, like a lot of chemicals. So, you know, it's lawyers and politicians trying to be very conservative to make sure that folks know, the right people know, because not everybody has the same health situation. And if there's anybody that's going to have issue, they want to make sure, you know, that one person is going to be protected. Certainly at 20 parts per trillion, I'm not a medical in the medical profession or anything along those lines, but that's an extraordinarily low number. And but even at the 20 parts just once, we're required to put out certain language, talk about getting phone calls, you know, some of the language that the DEP puts out that we're required to put out, that they wrote. And I think we used a little bit of it in your letter, and it can be scary. Again, it's written by lawyers, not really scientists or doctors, but and it's kind of contradictory also. But the bottom line is, I think if anybody, you know, there was a period of, it could have been a couple of hours, it could have been a few days, it could have been a few weeks. You know, there was about 4 to 5 weeks in between testing, that the level could have been slightly over at that one plant. And if somebody has a concern about that, they think it could bother them, they should certainly reach out to their healthcare professional.
Okay.
And,
So
we'll
last,
see
I
how
want
that
to
affects
give
them.
opportunity to, and I didn't mean to cut you off at the end there, but I want to give other people an opportunity to speak. But you're going to be sending communications out to people at home. You'll also have it on your website. Will there be a link on the town's main page regarding
Yes,
this?
it'll be on our page, going to, you know, DPW, water department, you'll have PFAS right there.
Now, if a resident should have a specific question, should they be calling through your office? Should they be going through the town manager?
That'll be, that will be in the letter, yes.
Okay.
And all there'll be 2 or 3 links to websites, with the state and federal regulators, our website, and certainly call myself or Joe at any time with any questions.
Then the last piece would be, could we get an update memo, as part of our package going forward over the next couple of months to see what the testing results are, like proactively provide it to this board so that we know how you're trending over the next 1 to 3 months to make sure that we're not moving in the wrong direction. I trust that you would let us know, but if I can just make that in the form of a
We'll share the test
request.
results, our monthly test results with the town manager, I'm sure.
Just put it in our package so we know we're on the right track. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here and for your attention on this issue. I do have a couple questions, if I may. You mentioned, Joe, the 16.5 parts result that came back today. When was that test taken?
That was taken on the 21st.
21st, okay. And so the October 6th result came back at 20.6, which is the reason you're here. Any idea, could you give us an idea where that compares to previous tests? I mean, for an average resident like myself who may not be familiar, do we run around in the 10 range, 15? Where do we normally
Yeah, absolutely.
find ourselves?
Absolutely. It jumps, they're an average about 15 or so. It does vary per month. We have some 14s, we could have a 16, but in general, it's such a minute trace, we're talking averaging around 15 or so.
Okay. And you mentioned the monthly testing. Do you think that it's necessary for us to test more frequently, given most recent events?
I don't believe so at this time, only because we've shown by taking this well off, again, we're at an extraordinarily minor, it was really a rounding error, or not an error, but just a rounding exercise that got us to 20.6. I don't want to go into the whole convoluted formula, but it was really just a very slight uptick to take on all that expense of testing. I just don't think it's necessary at this time, where we've shown that with the current carbon bed that appears to be coming to the end of its useful life, we're down to 16.5. And again, I believe when we test on November 1st, those results would be down lower than the 15 that we've pretty much had since the beginning of this testing. We should be down in between the 5 and 10 range.
Okay.
Again, we're talking nanograms per liter, which is an extraordinarily small amount, but nonetheless important. That 20 milligrams is, or 20 nanograms is put there for a reason, in the state.
Okay, thank you. And just for the benefit of the board and those watching, you mentioned that this is a Tier 2 level issue here, and so and that requires 30 days notification for the community. Could you tell me what would prompt a Tier 1 level? I mean, how far off are we from a Tier 1?
Many things, and unfortunately, things that we've had here over the last 30 years, related to Olin in some cases, something more normal, if you call that normal, would be a bacteria hit. So we test twice a month for bacteria. So if we came back with a bacteria hit, then the DEP would tell us to, sample upstream, downstream, that same one again, it came back. That would be a Tier 1 violation. We would immediately have to go out on television, put a boil water order in place, reverse 911, shut the tanks off. May have to shut the plants off if we can't figure out where the bacteria was coming from, and take water from surrounding communities, which we have done in years past. We've bought a lot of water from Burlington over the years, and MWRA, Woburn.
And so just to expand on that, so Tier 2 is 30 days notification. Do you know what the time frame would be for a Tier 1 violation?
Immediately.
Yeah,
Immediately.
24 hours.
Okay. Okay. And then just lastly, how confident are you that when we turn this station back on, this well back on, that residents won't be at risk? Specifically, what would be could you tell us the level of confidence you have that once this well is turned back on, how confident can residents be, especially if they're nursing or pregnant, or anybody for that matter? just want to let them know the
I'm
level of
confident
confidence.
that when we turn this well back on with the new carbon bed, that the PFAS levels in the town's water will be the lowest they've been in a while.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for being here and providing us with this presentation. Really, a lot of the questions that I had have been answered. This particular test, is this something that is new? Or have you been doing it for a while, 10 years, 20 years? Or is it?
Well, I'll speak to in generalities, and specific questions can go to Joe, but we actually did tests on this a couple of years ago, but the testing at that time was in parts per billion. So we were showing, basically no PFAS at parts per billion, because there's 1,000 parts per billion, and 1,000 nanograms, or parts per trillion, nanograms per liter, in 1 part per billion. So we're at 20 off from 1,000, so it showed up as 0. First test we did at parts per trillion was April, I believe.
Yeah, it just, in essence, it comes down to advances in laboratory technology. Nowadays, labs have the technology to detect samples at such a minute trace, whereas before they just didn't exist, especially cost effectively. So really, nobody in the public water system were testing at a parts per trillion level.
But my concern, and I had expressed it to the town manager, and was notification, where it says here that the town is required to give public notice, and you're saying it to be 30 days
Right.
to give it. So you don't think it should have been some informational notice to the public on an immediate basis to inform them of this higher level? So if my wife were pregnant or nursing and I found out you did the testing on October 6th, the results the 18th, it's now the 25th, and notification, I don't know when you're starting to do that officially, I think I'd be a little upset. So I'm wondering, is there a way that we can remedy that so that information gets out? I'm not talking about, hitting a panic button or shooting rockets in the sky, but
Right. Well, that's a tough line to draw, because, to get information out, you have social media, and we all know how that can go. Or we have, the Everbridge system, essentially reverse 911. So, Friday, 3 o'clock, I can send a blast out that nobody gets, or nobody picks up on, then they call back to my office an hour or two later, nobody's there. Or if we do keep staff there, we can't really tell them anything. Yeah, we had PFAS 0.6 nanograms per liter over, and the DEP says we need to give you notification within 30 days to just educate you on that there is PFAS in our system. There's no real violation. There's no, even though the language says there's a health risk for those immunocompromised, the reality of it, there is no real health risk, and that's why they don't require us to do like a bacteria hit or something along those lines. So, could we have done an Everbridge or something like that? I just figured after all the community's been through, especially with Olin, and then, certainly COVID over the past 20 months, to try to put that out there and just essentially scare people over something they really shouldn't be scared of. I don't want to name towns, but one of the towns to the south of us that abuts us, they've had, above 40 parts per trillion in their water, and they've known about it since the first testing in April, and they're still pumping 40 parts per trillion, and they will be for another couple of years before they can reduce it, and everybody's drinking it if they choose to, or not drinking it.
do you know that, and I don't want to talk about other communities, I
Right.
care about my community.
Right.
But I care about people,
Right.
In every community.
Absolutely.
But do you know if they've made communication known to their residents?
Well, they did they're probably into, once you exceed this 20 parts per trillion for 3 months in a row, then you've been ramped up to another level within the DEP, and you're probably under an administrative consent order. Then everything essentially that we've done, you'd have to lay that out legally, and they would give you a timeline to get it done. We were fortunate where we already have carbon beds. Other communities aren't. I believe it was about $15 million for them to put the carbon bed in. It's about a 2-year process to get it done, so.
Yeah, and I'm just going by what was sent to us, and I know you said you're not concerned with the health issues based upon the .6 over, but this sentence here that says that as a precaution measured by Mass DEP recommends consumers in a sensitive subgroup, and then they list them as we know, pregnant, nursing, infants, people diagnosed with compromised immune system, not consume, drink, or cook with water when the levels of the Pfas is above 20 ppt. So it's above that. And I just find it concerning that we're not letting people know before 30 days. That's my own personal feeling.
I can certainly see where you're coming from there.
I don't know if we should take an approach in the future, maybe look how we can address this issue to get communication out in a non-panic way. But if these individuals are not supposed to consume this water because it's above that level, I think they have a right to know. So,
Madam
So,
Chair,
you know, just to speak to a couple of those things, you know, this water was essentially a snapshot on a plant that runs 24/7, 365.
Yep.
So at that point in time, we got 20.6. We found out about it 3 weeks later, say, when we get the test results. So as soon as they gave us that, I said, okay, I can immediately take a well offline, and I know, you know, just on working in this business for so long, that's going to reduce it below 20.6 substantially, which, you know, bared out tonight with the test at 16.5. So all that water, if it went to 20.6 that day and stayed there for the next 3 weeks, or 4 weeks or whatever it was till we get to 16.5, the folks have already consumed that. It's a little late. It's just, you know, sending out a panic reverse 911 to tell them that, geez, November 6th we had, or October 6th we had Pfas 0.6 parts over the 20 nanogram per liter, which is a lifetime. Yes, the DEP is saying that for 20 nanograms per liter is a lifetime exposure, so you could drink that for a lifetime and it should be fine. Now, if that goes to 20.6, does that change things for your health? You know, again, I'm not a medical person, but, you know, it was just a call we had to make. It's something that the other 76 communities that have had to make these things, because they've all gone over 20, had to do. We were just following, you know, standard Massachusetts procedure, because, you know, New Hampshire, I believe it's 5 parts per trillion. So, you know, we should be calling every day if we use their standard, and then many states don't have a standard. Many states have some way of 10, some have 30, some have 50. You know, it's just, like I say, the science isn't there to pick something that's concrete and say, yeah, this is bad at this level, like it was trichloroethylene or some other volatile organic that is better well studied. So in this case, I think we chose the right path. You know, is there circumstances where this would be not the right path? Absolutely. I mean, if it was a different chemical or something substantially higher, if it had come in at 200 or even 40, you know, I guess that would be a decision. Even at 40, we would have to have, just knowing that other communities have that and higher, and they continue to drink the water. And
thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, if I could just note, and clearly, there's no question that the language that DEP uses in their and they require us to use in terms of the notice is certainly disconcerting when they reference on the one hand that the water is not necessarily unsafe to drink, but then they reference this particular group. And I would imagine to some measure that by targeting that particular group, it's again trying to be as conservative as they can and recognizing trying to avoid any potential, I guess, liability that that may come upon them by not suggesting that. But I want to just quote from a DEP fact sheet that states, "It is important to note that consuming water with Pfas 6 above the drinking water standard does not mean that adverse effects will occur. The degree of risk depends upon the level of chemicals and the duration of exposure." So I think that second piece is important, duration of exposure. So in this case, as I think Mike and Joe talked about, the potential duration of exposure at the 20.6 may have been, worst case scenario, 6 weeks. Whether it was 6 weeks or not, we don't know. The degree of risk depends upon the level of chemicals and the duration of exposure. The drinking water standard assumes that individuals drink only contaminated water, which typically overestimates exposure, and that they are also exposed to PFAS from sources beyond drinking water, such as food. To enhance safety, several uncertainty factors are additionally applied to account for differences between test animals and humans and to account for differences between people. Scientists are still working to study and better understand the health risks posed by exposures to PFAS. If your water has been found to have PFAS and you have specific health concerns, you may wish to consult with your doctor. And then separately it notes under this question, what options should be considered when PFAS 6 in drinking water is above Mass DEP drinking water standards. Sensitive subgroups, including pregnant or nursing women, infants, and people diagnosed by their healthcare providers to have a compromised immune system, should consider using bottled water that has been tested for PFAS 6 for their drinking water, cooking of food that absorbs water, like pasta, and making infant formula. So I think it's noteworthy that they say consider here, as opposed to it's not a absolute. But again, I think folks in that category would, as was noted above, want to consult with their doctor. So obviously we are concerned about anyone in the population, regardless of what their health status is, whether, and I think, if this test had come back at 19.6 instead of 20.6 or even 19.9, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. So I guess, does the fact that it was 0.7 or 7 parts, 0.7 parts per trillion above automatically create a health hazard? I can't say that it does. And again, I think the other issue we have to consider, not only the exposure amount, but the duration of exposure. So, I guess, it's a balancing act, in my estimation, of, on the one hand, not trying to falsely alarm people, but certainly doing what we need to do, and that is to inform people. Because, if we're, conceivably, I guess we could be notifying people anytime we have any kind of a PFAS hit, but then we would be sending out notices probably monthly.
One thing I would like to say, with you reading that about from the DEP and drinking bottled water, I think the DEP also recommends you check their website for which bottled water you buy, because several bottled waters have PFAS. So again, this stuff is everywhere. scientists believe that if they test the blood in the United States of everybody, that 98% of the people have PFAS in their blood. So this is how prevalent this chemical is.
So how, just kind of switch gears a little bit, I guess, so what can we do, or is there anything we can do as a community to prevent this from getting into the waters? I mean, I know it's you know, manufactured, how is it getting, outside of being dumped?
Well, the PFAS that we're looking at, which is 6, like Joe mentioned, out of, I think there's about 3,800 PFASs. The known, the worst ones were banned about 30 years ago for use in the United States, but they can still be imported. So they come in from various other countries, you know, as clothing or carpeting. Teflon pans was certainly the big one for a long time. Anything that's stain resistant or needs to be extraordinarily slippery, various lubricants and stuff. So yeah, be careful with any chemical you're using around your home for, you know, greasing or taking care of your vehicle or house maintenance, things you throw down your septic systems. Of course, if you have a septic system, everything goes right to the ground, which is groundwater, and that's what we use for our drinking water supply. So that would probably be the best advice I could give to the population at large, is just be mindful of what you're spilling on the ground and what you're dumping in your septic system.
Thank you. Did you
Yeah,
have a
Madam
thought?
Chair, just, I don't want to get into a back and forth with Mr. Hull, but I understand what he read from Mass DEP, and I understand what I'm reading from Mass DEP, that they recommend that consumers not consume, drink, or cook the water, and what he's reading is something different. So I don't know when that came out as opposed to when this came out. They seem to be
the
DEP
language
seems to be contradicting
Right.
themselves,
Right,
which is kind of crazy.
Which is
But,
classic DEP,
I
and
guess I'm
I tell
reading it
people in this room that
that
I'll
they
attest to
don't
that.
consume, and we certainly can't say that it's a, how did you put it, Mr. Hull? Can't say that it is a health hazard. Well, you can't say that it's not a health hazard. So,
You're
you
a
know,
medical folks, so we can't say, I think you need to see your doctor for
right.
yourself
Right.
or your
I
family.
certainly wouldn't want to assume it's not a health hazard when it could be.
And I also find it interesting that the EPA is at 70 trillion.
Right, and it's only health advisory, you know,
Yeah,
there's
it's-
no,
That just seems crazy coming from
again,
that
it's just
department,
not,
yeah.
you
I
know,
mean, I
science hasn't
appreciate
caught
that
up with
we're
it.
following a stricter guideline by all means, but it seems so vast, you know, of a difference, so.
You know, they say many states don't have any, so you
Yeah,
have
yeah.
whatever it is. You know, there's, I know there's several big communities in Arizona, they're in the 4,000 and 5,000 nanograms per liter, and
Yeah.
you need water, especially when you're living in a desert. So
Yeah,
you
sure.
do what you have to do, but, you know, it's just people should know about it so they can make informed decisions.
Right, right. Well, it looks like we have a lot more to learn, but I agree, you know, we need to obviously keep those levels low, and I appreciate Judy's recommendation that we just get a regular update in our packets.
Yeah, we'll get
On the
those to
testing,
you
that would be
monthly,
great.
and we're certainly, we'll be charting every month,
Yep,
so we'll be able to see that rise. We'll know when the carbon is
okay.
not capable of removing PFAS as efficiently as we had hoped, and schedule a carbon change. So we shouldn't have to be in here before you again with this, on this subject anyway.
Yeah, well, we'd love to have you back when the project's completed, to give us an update and when everything's done, and give us an update on all that, on the completion.
Madam Chair, just an observation, and I hope I'm not overstepping, but I see that there are some people in the audience. I know it's not a public hearing, but this is definitely a community-related item. We have the gentleman here from the Water Department. My concern is if we table allowing the public to speak for
I was
public
thinking the same,
comments and
yep.
they're not here to help field any questions, we may not be able to provide the right information.
I was thinking the same thing. So at that, I would like to open it up to public comments to this particular subject only. So if anybody in the audience here does have a question for Mike or Joe, please stand up, state your name and address, and ask your question, please.
Liz Harriman, I'm at 39 Birchwood Road in Wilmington, and I'm also the Deputy Director at the Toxics Use Reduction Institute at UMass Lowell, and we spend our lives these days doing PFAS work.
I bet you are.
Not good, but, you know,
No.
it's got to be done, as you say.
Right.
I just wanted to mention the longer chain chemicals, many of which are in the Pfas 6, have not been banned for 30 years. They are being phased out now, but some of those chemicals are still in use. Clearly, some of the chemicals that you've been measuring, the Pfas and PFOA, are probably historical use, but that also speaks to the Selectmen's questions about how long have we been exposed. It's likely been a long time. So it's not like this is, a month ago, we actually just...
Like I said, we started testing, at parts, nanograms per liter in April, so
Right.
what was prior to that? Don't know.
Right, so it's likely been in the water for quite some time. And I guess there are things we can do. You ask, what can we do? Absolutely. Every single day, we dump more of this stuff into our environment. This is what the Toxic Use Reduction Program does. We try to keep us from dumping more and more of it into our environment. So I think it's a really great question. And I guess we would start by asking whether our fire department has AFFF on site that still has PFHXS or PFAS or PFOA. And the state has a program.
That firefighting foam is maybe the biggest culprit. And, on 93, a lot of the runoff of 93 goes to our well fields, unfortunately. So we see high rises in sodium chlorides and what have you, and other de-icing chemicals. And any fire out there is, doused with foam typically, which is heavily based on PFAS.
Yeah, so encourage us to look at sources and try to see what we can do.
I would thank you for your information. Just on that, I wonder if there's something, and I'm sure you probably have some information on maybe some tips on what we could do to reduce it. If you don't mind sending that to us, just maybe as a board here, maybe we can get some stuff out into the community to help get that, do our part to kind of get it down if we can. That'd be great. Suzanne.
Suzanne Sullivan, 16 Lawrence Street. I just wanted to address a couple things. Liz actually addressed a couple of things because we don't really know what the exposure was to the people to say that or even consider that the exposure was just when we tested it and that we're all safe. That's not that we don't know. It's unfortunate. It was the same thing obviously with NDMA. We didn't know. But there was one comment that was said that the science isn't there. The science is there. The politics aren't there. The EPA is at 70 because of politics. There's a lot of big industry that doesn't want lower standards. Even in the state of Massachusetts to go to 20, it's all based on politics. It's more like the Department of Environmental Politics, not necessarily protection. I'm concerned about where this is coming from. As we all know, I've advocated for a very long time about trying to protect the water supply in North Wilmington. It's at huge risk. The land use around there is heavy industrial in a lot of places. There's an industrial use 500 feet, 600 feet from some of our wells. I don't know what wells the PFAS came from, but a lot of those industrial uses can also use PFAS in, say, concrete and things of that nature. And there's a lot of concrete production in our aquifer. So if there's something that we want to do to protect the aquifer, we should be looking at the land use that's around there and doing things differently than what we're doing today. I'm concerned with the fact that, the way that we use the wells in the Maple Meadowbrook aquifer and, we're dewatering. I think we have to use MWRA water more, and I think we need to relax our wells in the summertime. I'm going to start pushing that. The town's obligated to start doing that, and that may actually help prevent, these situations from happening. Because the harder you pump your wells, you send it out through sewer lines, you dewater your water supply, you can highly concentrate contaminants. That's actually what happened at Maple Meadow and Olin. We pumped the heck out of that aquifer, and there wasn't a lot of recharge back in because a lot of things were sewered. The only thing that was recharging, unfortunately, was Olin Springs. So I guess that's my concern, is where it's coming from, and I would suggest that the town try to figure that out. It's not good enough for me as a resident to be told, well, we'll just keep changing the carbon. Let's try to figure out where it came from. We have geo-insights. Why not look at where it's coming from instead of just accepting the fact that it's there? And I just want to, I appreciate Mr. Carver's comments. We don't know what the safe level is totally, but I've read studies that they tested thousands of pregnant women, and all those pregnant women had PFAS in their breast milk, all over the world. It's in you, it's in me, it's in you, it's in all of us.
Like I say 98% is what the saying.
Yeah, it's
The United States
in us.
population has PFAS in the
That's how invasive this chemical is. And it's a forever chemical, it builds up in you. So you never get rid of it. So any exposure to it, you're just building up more PFAS in your body that you will never get rid of. So that's why it's at such a small amount. So to say that it's at a safe level it's not at a safe level. Don't assume that it's a safe level, because you don't know how much PFAS I already have in my body. You don't know how much you have in your body, or how much your kids have. So any exposure to it's not good. It's unfortunate, and I know we're not the only community. It's just that we as a nation have not taken good care of our water, and we need it to live. We don't live without it. It's just depressing to have another aquifer that's facing these kind of troubles. And I would strongly suggest that we look to see where it's coming from and see if we can head it off. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
I'm Martha Stevenson, 7 Chandler Road. Collectively, we represent the Wilmington Environmental Restoration Committee. We're better known for Maple Meadowbrook and Olin. But as Suzanne says, our drinking water is critical to life for all of us and all the creatures on the planet. So it's important that we protect it. I personally think we're lucky that we had a hit above 20 nanograms, because now we know for sure that we have a problem. And DPW is already taking steps to try to help at least protect us from the over 20. But I think Suzanne and Liz both point out that just because we had a hit of 20.6 doesn't mean everything's hunky-dory and it's going to go away. I do have a couple questions, if you don't mind. Mike, you had mentioned a well was shut down. Can you be more specific which one?
Sure, Barrows.
I'm sorry?
Barrows Wellfield.
Barrows,
Yeah.
okay.
That's the one in Hathaway Acres.
Yep. And is that same well responsible for the need for the carbon treatment to begin with?
No, the carbon treatment was built in the plant right from the beginning, 1989.
Just as a preventative?
It was just a duplicate plant of the one we built at Potter's Row in 1980, which had a lot of volatile organic compounds. Again, the town spent a lot of money looking for trichloroethylene, dichloroethylene at that time. Never found out where it was coming from, but we continue to have it. It might have been something to do with Olin, in retrospect of everything that happened there, but it was
So in
too
addition
difficult
to
to
the
find.
air strippers, you also have the...
We do have air strippers, but
Yeah.
that doesn't do much for PFAS.
Okay.
It does for volatiles, but not PFAS.
And then I'm assuming from what you mentioned that the Shawshene well was the one sampled at the Butters Road treatment plant?
Right.
Because it's the one online. Is there any thought of sampling the other wells when they come back online for the Olin sampling that EPA says will be done soon?
Oh,
I don't know how long soon is, but...
The 5, maybe we can, our next meeting with the EPA, we can talk them into taking a look, because certainly, they want to bring this big swamp buggy out there to do all the testing. We don't have access to that type of equipment, and it wouldn't want to go out there twice, so we'd rather have them do it. And if, we have to pay for it, then we'd pay for it, but if they'd sample it first and things, we could do
If
that.
they can actually do the sampling,
Yeah.
it would make a lot of sense.
Might give us a little insight of what's going on there. It may come back 0, shockingly, but
Well, it
they
could help
test, you don't know.
pinpoint, if Maple Meadow does not have high levels, I doubt that that's the case, but if they were to come back indicating lower levels, then that would indicate that some of the land uses in North Wilmington might be contributing. And as you say, nobody really knows completely where it comes from.
Butters Row well, which is, the only well that treats is off Shawshene Avenue, Aldrich Road area, and that's just about as high as the Martins Brook.
So it's everywhere.
Yeah, that's it. Unfortunately, it's everywhere. I hate to say that because it sounds so negative, but it seems to be.
So, well, I would second Liz and Suzanne's comments that if the board and the town collectively should work to identify possible sources, and to do anything and everything possible as more technology becomes available to upgrade our treatment systems. To keep our
Right,
systems.
certainly, if this continues and, or gets worse, and, you know, like I said earlier, we have contingencies to, worst case scenario, go to full MWRA, which we know is 0 PFAS. Be expensive for the town, but, you know, ratepayers, but.
If I could make one more comment, for years and years and years, the League of Women Voters in this town advocated for watershed protection and buying up the land around our wells and not allowing more and more industry. And basically, we got laughed at every town meeting. So I think.
I will tell you that we do own all of the Zone 1s for all our wells.
Sure, but Zone 1 isn't very big. Yeah.
It's pretty good sized, and we do own a lot of land. But
And we should-
unfortunately, that's been in the last 30, 40 years. Most of these chemical
But we shouldn't
problems have
sell
gone
off
on
any more
for centuries.
watershed land either, especially in North Wilmington where most of it is these days. Anyway, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Hi, my name is Stephanie Bama. I'm at 14 Kelly Road. I have Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry, and you already answered my question about what year the carbon filters were installed. You said 1989.
Well, the entire plant was built in 1989, and the original design required carbon filters.
Okay. Thank you, and I would like to second the rest of the comments. I'm also a member of work. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from the members of the audience? Nope. Okay, any further questions or statements from the board? Okay, all right. Thank you, gentlemen, appreciate it.
Please check out our webpage, and any questions, feel
Yep.
free to give us a call.
We sure will. Thank you, appreciate it.
I did have this one fact I'd love to tell you that,
Mhm.
just to put nanograms per liter into perspective, if you had 1 inch, the equivalent would be 16 million miles. 1 inch and 16 million miles is the same as 1 nanogram per liter.
Oh, wow. Yep.
One comment to that is that that's also the level of an endocrine in your body that might have made you a boy instead of a girl.
True.
Oh, okay.
Which PFAS messes with.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna move on to communications. Mr. Hull.
Yes, under communications, first I'm pleased to announce the appointment of Beth Lawrenson as the town clerk. As you know, she's been the temporary town clerk since September 14th, when our former town clerk departed. She's worked for the town since 2012, started as senior clerk in the Planning Conservation Office, and then transferred to the town clerk's office in 2016 as a senior clerk. She was then promoted to the assistant town clerk position in February of this past year. She's demonstrated a great way about her in terms of interacting with residents. Is always eager to jump in and research issues that she's not familiar with, and has dealt with, as you know, a number of elections, state, federal, local elections, and town meetings. So I'm very comfortable that she's qualified, also has a associate's degree in liberal arts from Middlesex Community College. We are going to be having her swearing in tomorrow afternoon here at 3:30. Next memo from me to the board with regard to the Public Records Access Officer. As you know, the town clerk is a major participant in the whole public records piece, is really the keeper of the records. And one of the requirements is that we have public records access officers. The town clerk really serves in that role for most of general government, with the exception of police and fire. So my recommendation is that the board ratify my designation of Beth Lawrenson as the public records access officer. Next is a memo with regard to a proposed special town meeting. As you know, we are in the eligibility period with respect to the MSBA grant program for a school. And one of actually the final element to that, after information gathering and so on that I'll talk about next, there is a need to appropriate funds for a feasibility study, and this is where we have a firm that comes in and assists us in terms of looking at the various options. That eligibility period ends on March 28th, and so we need to have a special town meeting to appropriate funds. I'm suggesting the board consider either March 7th, which is a Monday, or March 8th. The board doesn't need to call the meeting at this point, but I would ask that the board consider giving me some direction on whether either of those dates is acceptable. I do know, in talking to the school department, that the auditorium, high school auditorium, is available, and that's clearly the preferred venue. Also, as a plan B, so to speak, I've reached out to the Shriners to find out if the auditorium is available in the event that we are continuing to deal with COVID, and we have, hopefully things will not be in the place they were last year, but if we have to have increased restrictions in terms of distancing and so on, and the auditorium is not available, I'd like to have a plan B, but we'll be looking for a date. Next, under communications, is a memo from me with regard to the Wildwood School Building Committee. They met for the first time on the 18th last week. As part of the eligibility period, one of the steps was to create a building committee which will serve as really the main committee for overseeing this project as it goes forward, both through eligibility and then beyond if it goes to that point. And so the meeting was held last week to update members on where we stand. Dr. Brand serves as chair. Paul Ruggiero is the vice chair. They provided an update in terms of the information that's been provided to MSBA to this point, including educational profile and online enrollment projections. George Hooper, who's also on the committee, is in the process of putting together information associated with our building maintenance plan and our capital investment plan. It's expected that this group will meet monthly, and the November date is yet to be determined. Next is the memo that was provided by Mike Woods and Joe Labeo, which was already addressed. That brings us to board to consider, which is a request from Louis Samaglia, Director of Veteran Services, to use the town common on Thursday, November 11th for Veterans Day ceremonies, and the invitation for the Board of Selectmen to participate.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Unanimous.
Again, a board to consider,
Page 56.
oh, I'm sorry.
Lawrence, that's appointment. Do you
Oh,
have- do you have a different one?
oh, okay, yeah, board, yes, board to consider authorizing Beth Lawrenson's appointment as a records access officer.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? So moved.
And then one further board to consider with regard to a request from Louis Samaglia, again, regarding the lighting the town common green during the month of November in support of veterans.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Unanimous. Great, thank you. Now, any further public comments? Yes?
Good evening, Madam Chair, Board of Selectmen, Town Manager, and Bev. More of an invitation more than a public comment, so to say. For the past several years, Scout Troop 136 and Cub Scout Pack 136 has been working with local veterans, and what we do is that around the holiday time, we secure the Mason Hall, and we do write holiday cards and Christmas cards for Veterans Day. And that's going to be on October 30th. So I just wanted to, I'll leave them, I know we're kind of concerned about paper and stuff, I'll leave, there's some flyers there if anybody wants to attend. Typically what we do is that we have a bunch of holiday cards, and we've asked the public to come in. It's from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Saturday, October 30th. And essentially what we do is that we have a bunch of holiday cards, and we basically just have, we have the cards, we have pens, and just asking people to say, hey, if you got a half hour or something like that, say Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas, whatever, to a local, and it's just, it's not signed by your name per se, but, if you wanted to, but, Wilmington, grateful Wilmington resident or something like that. The other thing that we're doing is that we're collecting new clothes and toiletries. And again, everything is going to be going to the local veterans. So I just wanted to announce, I know a couple of you have been there in previous years, and if you can make it, great. If not, at least just wanted to get the word out.
No, that's wonderful. We'll be sure to get that posted and,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, it's a little early, but we're trying to, we figured that in the spirit of Veterans Day, and by the time, you figure it out, we're basically into November. We want to get the cards to the organization so that they can get them to the veterans, so that they'll have everything set for the holidays and not getting everything, quote, last minute. So,
Right, I think it's wonderful. I
So
appreciate
again,
you doing that.
yeah, so it's at the Mason Hall this Saturday, October 30th, 11 a.m., 2 p.m. The public is, very much invited, and especially kids. We're trying to get, kids and people just involved, and just,
Sure.
again, recognizing our veterans.
Yep. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any further announcements? Mr. Bindle.
Thank you very much. I have two, if I may. First, I want to compliment the rec department on the Horribles Parade that took place yesterday. It was an incredible turnout. There was a lot of great costumes. I think the kids had a great time, and also want to thank the Wilmington Police Department and Fire Department who assisted, but it was a great community event yesterday. Obviously, great weather for it, too, so.
Yeah, that's great.
Secondly, and lastly, I just wanted to take a quick moment to acknowledge the passing of Coach Mark Donovan, who passed away 2 weeks ago after a courageous battle with cancer. Although he was a Tewksbury resident, he had a huge impact on a lot of people in Wilmington, including myself and others at this table. And so, for more than 30 years, he worked at Shawshene Tech as the wrestling coach and with the Middlesex Sheriff's Office, so he had a lot of interaction with a lot of families here in town. And he was about as highly decorated and accomplished coach as you could imagine. He earned every award known to man, including being inducted into the National Hall of Fame in Stillwater, Oklahoma. In fact, the town of Barica recognizes March 19th as Mark Donovan Day. And so he was a huge mentor of mine, and he was a tremendous leader of men. And he will be missed by this community. He was a great leader for this community. So anyways, I want to continue to pray for Patty, Sean, and Matt, and the entire Donovan family. I want to thank the Wilmington Police Department who assisted with the funeral last week. They did a great job of closing some of the streets for the Donovan family, and he was continuing to be in our thoughts. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Greg. And our thoughts and prayers do go to his family and friends as well, because I've heard such wonderful things about him from you and other people in the community, the Shawshene community, and I wish I knew him, but I feel like I do from hearing all these wonderful stories that I've heard over the past couple of weeks. So thank you for sharing. Any new business?
Madam Chair, I would just make one note. This came out late Friday from the state with regard to came out from the Mass Department of Public Health with regard to the West Nile virus it notes here, announced their 9th human case of West Nile virus in the state. The individual was in Middlesex County. 27 communities in Essex, Middlesex, Norfolk, and Suffolk counties are in the high-risk category. 71 communities are in the moderate risk for West Nile virus. I would note that based upon my conversation with Shelley, we are in the moderate category and have remained there. While the risk for West Nile is declining at this time of the year, some risk will continue until there's been a hard frost. So I just encourage folks, and we do have information on the town's website, Board of Health, certainly in terms of steps you can take to avoid that kind of a situation, but wanted to make the board aware of it.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to important dates.
Under important dates, we have October 27th is a brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Again, on the 30th, a brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. October 31st is Halloween. Just be safe. November 1st to the 5th, a curbside collection of yard waste. November 4th, the next Senior Center Building Committee, Town Hall, Room 9, 6 p.m. November 7th, turn the clocks back, and also, as the fire department always suggests, please change your detector batteries. November 7th, Community Open House, Shawshene Tech, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. November 8th is the next Board of Selectmen's meeting, Town Hall, Room 9, 7 p.m. November 11th is Veterans Day Ceremony, Town Common, 11 a.m. Town offices will be closed. November 15th, as was previously noted, Verizon Cable License Renewal Ascertainment Public Hearing, Town Hall Auditorium, 6 p.m. November 15th through the 19th, another curbside collection of yard waste. Economic Development Committee meets on November 16th, Town Hall Auditorium, 6 p.m. And then another curbside collection of yard waste from November 29th through December 3rd.
Great, thank you very much. Now for our salute to service, Mr. Bendel.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's my pleasure on behalf of the Wilmington Board of Selectmen and our residents to give our salute to service this week to Richard H. Grinder, Jr. for his service to our country as a captain in the United States Army, earning the Bronze Star Vietnam Service Medal, the Bronze Star in the Republic of Vietnam Campaign Medal, and a number of other medals, including National Defense Service Medal with one oak leaf cluster, and with a combination medal for his service to our community. He joined the service in June of 1954 and served for 14 and a half years. Very highly decorated veteran. He, but more importantly, was married to his wife for 67 years before she passed away earlier this year. And so they raised their family on Middlesex Ave and were heavily involved with the Wilmington Congressional Church. And so for his service to our country and to our community, we salute him. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for your service, Mr. Grinder. That will wrap up our meeting. Do I have a, oh,
Just
Mr. Hull,
before
sorry.
the wrap-up, and I probably should have asked this earlier, but with regard to the proposed dates for that special, is there any direction the board wishes to give, or should this be brought up as a matter at the meeting on the 8th?
This is for March 7th or 8th for the special town meeting?
Right.
Does anybody have any?
I'll jump out there and say that, you know, I'll make either date available, but I find from a community standpoint, just my opinion, that Mondays and Fridays are particularly sometimes tough for people.
Yeah, I agree.
If they have a commitment or, you know, a wedding obligation or something of the sort, I think Mondays and Fridays are a bit risky. So I would, you know, be more inclined to recommend Tuesday. That's just my opinion. That might not work for some people at this table, and I respect that, but just an observation.
Yep.
Mondays sometimes are tough for people.
I'm fine with that. I can do either day too, but I think that is a good point, that maybe we do Tuesday and Monday as a backup if for some reason Tuesday didn't work, or I don't know if we could do that Wednesday, but anybody have any further? Nope.
Okay, so I will proceed based upon a March 8th date. Obviously, the board at a later date can call the meeting, but we'll
Yep.
assume that for the moment. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Adjourn. Yep.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
WCTV, connecting our community.